I just want to go around the room, the metaphorical room, and just give a player and why you're looking forward to watching them. Okay. And we will start with you, Garret. You have the first pick of players you are looking forward to watching against the vaunted New York Giants, coached by John Harbaugh, quarterbacked by Jackson Dart, running backed by Cam Scadaboo for now until he may get hurt. Who's
fastest caught by Malik Neighbors?
yeah. Can name the whole roster. Just kidding.
Right. The player that I'm easy here, Charles Demings. Heard everything about him through camp. He should get a lot of reps in the preseason. Day 3 pick. This is a preseason made for a draft pick like Charles Demings. I can't wait to see him live in action. This has been a corner for the first time in years that we've heard a player, hyped up this much to the level that he has been. I'm really looking forward to seeing him in real game action on Saturday.
Yeah, Charles Demings, he is just beyond electric when you talk to the guy. And then consistently, I mean, Coller, I'll just say, like, recent days, I've seen him lining up at kind of like slot defender. Sometimes he's been on the outside. He's physical and press. How much he's going to be willing to tackle on the field. What have you thought of all the hype, Coller? We might have talked about this last weekend, but for Chuck D, as Brian Flores calls him, which is a nod, I think, to Public Enemy, what have you thought of Chuck Demings?
Yeah, I don't know if Chuck Demings has listened to a lot of Public Enemy, but I think that he's one of the most unique players that I can remember coming out in the draft to the Vikings that we've seen in training camp, because we do have it in our minds where the person was drafted. It's relevant to our first impressions of them and our expectations of them. But from pretty much day 1 of training camp, I have not seen a 5th round draft pick. I have seen something much better than that. The athleticism is where it's so rare. When you hear, he came from FCS, you go, oh, great. Like a try hard kind of guy who had 19 picks, but probably can't play at this level. He is as good of any athlete that came out at the cornerback position in the NFL draft. It just so happens that the guy chose to stick with Stephen F. Austin because he had loyalty to them. And as you and I have gotten to know him, he's a different kind of dude. I think he thinks different. I think he acts different. And his energy and drive, you could tell that this guy wants to be successful. You get that right away from some young players. So when you combine athleticism, drive, coachability, which Brian Flores has praised a lot, I think that is all adding up to Charles Demings being someone that we are going to watch as a potential future starter. I'm going to also throw out maybe a really deep cut here for the preseason of Caleb Banks. I would like to see the 1st round draft pick. I'm curious how much he plays because, Brian Flores was kind of suggesting, I'm paraphrasing here, but how much Caleb Banks plays might be up to him with how he plays in these preseason games, because we've seen limited reps. He's starting to get a little more as we've gone along, but it's still not a lot thus far in practice. And I thought that Flores strongly insinuated that we're going to have to be patient with Caleb Banks, but do you get a couple of those reps from him where you go, maybe not that patient, or does it look like, he's a rookie and it's going to be a while?
Yeah, I think the Caleb Banks one, Coller, I mean, I'm with you where I don't feel like I've seen much of a sample size of him at all. Like, you see him out on the field. He's an absolute specimen. There's no question about it. But you guys know probably better than I do, like, the level of technique required to beat some of these offensive linemen with how sharp they are and how many tools they have in their bag does require a certain amount of, it requires get off at a certain time. It requires like hand leverage and some of that stuff. So again, hand leverage is where I'm just trying my hardest, but
and you can see that in practice, right? You could see his hand leverage.
Well, I actually stood, where I'm talking about, today at the TCO Performance Center before practice began, this position split up into all sorts of areas. And I stood on the pavement and I just watched the defensive tackles, and I was watching some hand leverage, some holding, some move. I was watching a lot of stuff going on. Garret, Caleb Banks, your thoughts?
Yeah, I can't wait to see him out there. There's been a lot of, whenever you have a draft pick like Caleb Banks with the physical tools he has, you want to project the best. So I think the way that Collar said is, are we going to have the flashes, or are we going to have is he okay? He's kind of the red shirt type season from an interior defensive lineman that you expect more often than not. So he's another player I'm looking forward to seeing. Absolutely.
We're all rookies here. I'm taking another rookie that actually is a deep cut, Collar. And his name is Jacob Thomas, not Jacoby Thomas. Jacob Thomas, the safety, undrafted safety from James Madison. You may forget that James Madison last year made the college football playoff. They were coached by Bob Chesney, who's an absolute stud. Hopefully he sees that. And got hired at UCLA. And Jacob Thomas was a captain for that team. I know he didn't get drafted, but there were multiple teams that really sought him in undrafted free agency. One of them was the Vikings. He comes to Minnesota. And I mean, I feel like I've seen him take snaps with like the twos already. He's had a somewhat of a special teams role so far in some of the drills I've watched. And like there have been a couple sequences. I think there was a play during the night practice where he made a play on the ball and deflected a pass. So look, Jacoby Thomas would also be on the list, but I'm going ultimate deep cut with Jacob Thomas at safety. And that's a position group where, I mean, it's going to be really interesting to try to iron out, Collar, like who they take and how many, because you've got Josh Metellus, Jay Ward, Theo Jackson, Jacoby Thomas, Jacob Thomas. What do you do with Jamal Adams? How do you position, categorize him? I mean, that's an interesting group, but can you make fun of me for saying Jacob Thomas out of the gate here?
No, Jacob Thomas has been one of my guys of camp that I feel like if we were doing stock up, I think his stock has been way up. And when you see him working with the special teams and everything else, you kind of see already like the wheels turning of a development path of like, could he be one of those guys who starts out as an undrafted free agent special teamer and then works his way up, which we've seen a number of times. Let me move it over to a different position though, the wide receiver room. I think that Jefferson will make the team. I think that Addison is going to make the squad just from, my eye from practice, not any other information.
Good eye for Tom.
I know. I don't know why they haven't brought me on for scouting, but no, I think
you actually probably don't. Look, I've seen you give your opinions to some directly who may work 2 floors above where I'm sitting right now. So anyway.
There are stories that can't be told there, but when it comes to the depth of the room, Ty Felton, I think, has had a great camp. I mean, he's had a couple of drops, but he has really established himself as a deep threat for them, who's getting a ton of first team reps. Dylan Bell made a lot of plays in minicamp, but we know the threes are not going to get work until the actual preseason. Terrell Davis is a guy who is a deep cut, but he was a D2 wide receiver that set the record for, or led all of college football in receiving. So he's an intriguing one. Like they have guys who we haven't seen anything of yet who could really start to make a name for themselves. And Miles Price as a wide receiver has become a very interesting thing during this camp because we didn't see that at all last year. And he's making plays every single day. So